correcting resolutions. They're an attack on women's health care issues, and they're an attack on quality health care for all Americans. We need to pass the budget, but these correcting resolutions should be defeated. And with that, I would yield the floor.
The senator from Iowa.
Before I speak, I ask unanimous consent for 5 additional minutes.
Without objection.
Since January, I have been investigating allegations from whistleblowers at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. The allegations that I've received are shocking, but sadly, they appear to be true. And praise the Lord for whistleblowers in this government, because we don't know where the skeletons are buried, and they help us to do our constitutional role of oversight, checks and balances of government. The ATF is supposed to stop criminals from trafficking guns to Mexican drug cartels, was actually making that trafficking of arms easier for them. That would be bad enough if it happened because of incompetence or turf battles. But it looks like the agency was doing this on purpose. The government actually encouraged gun dealers to sell multiple firearms to known and suspected traffickers. 2 of those guns ended up at the scene of a murder of U.S. Border Patrol agent in Arizona. His name was Brian Terry, and his family deserves answers from their very own government. I've been fighting for those answers. I have written 8 letters to the Justice Department. I have asked for documents. I've asked that specific questions be answered. At first, the Justice Department simply denied the charges. Then one of the whistleblowers went on television. He risked his career to tell the truth on CBS Evening News. He had a sense of duty to Agent Terry's family and in turn to the entire population of this great country. He could not believe that his own government refused to come clean and to tell the truth when questioned by this United States senator. And so he went public to set the record straight. Other whistleblowers confirmed what this other whistleblower had said. In fact, I received internal government documents that confirmed what he said. Anonymous patriots tried to ensure that the truth would come out. And you know, that's about the only crime that whistleblowers commit, committing truth. Isn't that sad? I forwarded many of those documents that I've received clandestinely to Attorney General Holder and Acting Director Melson. And I asked them how to square the denials from that department with the evidence that I have received both orally and on paper. At Attorney General Holder's confirmation hearing now 2 years ago, I told him, and I quote myself, "I expect that you will be responsive to my oversight work and that my questions and document requests will be taken seriously. I hope that I have your assurance that if you are confirmed, you will assist me with oversight activities, be responsive to my requests, and help me make the Justice Department accountable." End of this senator's quote 2 years ago. Now, the Attorney General, who was a nominee at that time, responded, and I quote, this is before his confirmation, "I will try to do all that I can to make sure that we respond fully and in a timely fashion to the very legitimate questions that I know that you have propounded to the Department." End of quote. But now controls in an operation like I just described. Law enforcement should not cross the line into actually assisting criminals just for the simple process of gathering information. Operations should be carefully focused on stopping crime without risking public safety. Seizing contraband and making arrests are the most important goals. Big headline-grabbing cases to advance some prosecutor's career should take a back seat to any of these gambles. Yesterday, I sent a letter to Attorney General Holder with some more documents. So I'm sending the department documents that I'd like to have them send me. And these are documents that maybe the Attorney General himself didn't know about. There are emails between a federally licensed firearms dealer and the supervisor in this Arizona case known as Fast and Furious. In one email, the dealer raises for a third time now his concerns about how the case is being handled. This time he was prompted by a story on Fox News about the growing firearms problem on our border with Mexico. The dealer wrote, and this is a long quote, so I start to quote now from the gun dealer. "The segment is disturbing to me. I shared my concerns with you guys that I wanted to make sure that none of the firearms that murdered with, or at least we think he got murdered with one of these guns. These guns were at the scene, at least. Now, that email that I just quoted was sent to the supervisor of the case 6 months before guns from that case were found at the scene of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry's murder. The government put these firearms dealers in a completely unfair position, and let me explain that. Because on the one hand, these gun dealers rely upon the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms for their license to even to be able to be in business. So, of course, these agents want to cooperate with the government. When you got this big club hanging over your head, will you be licensed or not licensed? On the other hand, the government asks these gun dealers to keep selling to the bad guys even after the dealers warned that it might end in tragedy. Now, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to the bottom of this. The House Oversight Committee has joined in my effort and issued a subpoena for documents. Because it might duplicate the process in the House, I have not sought any subpoenas or hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee yet. I have not exercised my right to object to any unanimous consent requests on nominations because of this issue yet. However, I want my colleagues and officials at the Justice Department to hear this loud and clear. If that's what it takes, then I will take those actions. I hope it doesn't have to come to that. I hope that the Justice Department will decide to cooperate and provide the information we need, doing our constitutional responsibility of oversight to make sure the checks and balances of system of government under our Constitution is working. Now, it's been nearly 3 months since I first raised this issue. It's past time for the Justice Department to come clean. Madam President, I ask for consent to put a copy of this letter to Holder in the record.
Without objection.
How much time do I have left?
The senator has 4 minutes remaining.
Thank you. I want to take just part of that 4 minutes for another issue. I'd like to talk about immigration and a part of the immigration issue that concerns me, and by golly, it's got something to do with government oversight as well. Last August, some lawyers at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service drafted internal memos outlining ways that the administration could get around Congress and grant undocumented aliens in the U.S. with legal status. These amnesty memos outline ways that the executive branch could use discretionary authority to make sure that thousands, or who knows, maybe even millions of people here illegally could stay here without a vote of Congress. A number of Republicans sent a letter to President Obama urging him to abandon any such plan. We sent several letters to Homeland Security Secretary Napolitano asking for statistics and briefing on these memos. We asked for assurances that such plans to bypass Congress, emphasize plans to bypass Congress, not be implemented. Now, what did we get? All we got was radio silence. Madam President, I raise this issue again today because I'm bothered by reports that there's another push for this administration to grant amnesty through executive order that really should only be done by law of this Congress to certain groups of undocumented population. And surprisingly, the push for this is coming from our friends on the other side of the aisle. Yesterday, 22 Democrats sent a letter to President Obama asking him to turn a blind eye to the law. These 22 senators said they were okay with having an executive branch go ahead and go around Congress and grant amnesty to those that would be eligible under the so-called DREAM Act. These senators said that they didn't have the votes to get the bill through the Senate last year. So their approach is, in a non-constitutional fashion, to use what's referred to legally as prosecutorial discretion to keep these undocumented individuals here. They claim doing so would be, quote, unquote, consistent with our strong interest in the rule of law. They say that doing so would, quote, unquote, help to conserve limited enforcement resources. Now, I'm appalled, and I hope a lot of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are appalled, that members of this body think that an executive order to grant amnesty behind our backs is not an assault on the democratic process. Congress has the power to change immigration laws, and only Congress has the power to change immigration laws. The President has limited authority to grant relief in limited and emergency circumstances, and I support the President's power to do that. But it wasn't meant to be used in a blanket fashion. The request by 22 members of this body is an affront to our country's longstanding belief in the rule of law, and it's an attack on this body's duty to legislate on behalf of the American people, a power to legislate that the President does not have. I happen to agree that our immigration policies have to be reformed. I will commit to moving legislation that expands upon or improves the legal avenue we currently have in place. But once again, we have not seen leadership by this President to work on a bill that this Congress can support. Until that time comes, it would be foolish and disappointing if this President circumvented the democratic process and did what 22 members of this body asked him to do in that letter that I've referred to. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise near the end of this very, very important and profoundly significant debate to make some points about dollars and cents in health care, but also the impacts of health care on human beings, and particularly the threats to cut back health care in the name of an ideological war on women's health care. Our nation is in the midst of a fiscal crisis, and we need to recognize that there is a very immediate and important imperative to cut the costs of health care in this country. The costs of health care are spiraling out of control at a rate 5 times the rate of inflation, and the President commendably is talking about the need for serious measures and sensible conversation about what can be done to control and reduce the cost of health care. And he has initiated Partnership for Patients, which is another step in his continuing effort, and I believe this body's continuing effort, to reduce needless costs where they can be prevented. For example, reducing the incidence of readmissions to hospitals and providing for better outpatient treatment after people are out of a hospital. To reduce infections that are caused by wounds. To reduce the costs of drugs when they are overprescribed or misprescribed. These kinds of costs are preventable, and we have an obligation to reduce those costs of health care when they are preventable. Higher quality at lower cost has to be our objective. And lowering costs also means preventive care for women when they can't afford it. That is what Planned Parenthood does. The threat of House Resolution 36 is to that profoundly important goal, higher quality of health care at lower costs, that we can achieve as a nation if we invest in preventive care. The threat of House Resolution 36 is therefore not only to the 1.4 million patients across the country who would be deprived of that preventive care, and not only to the 65,000 women in Connecticut who are at risk, but to all of us, to our families, to our fiscal health, because we know that Planned Parenthood saves $4 for every dollar invested in family planning and in screening and testing, the pap smears, mammography, other kinds of preventive health care that are absolutely critical to saving money and increasing the quality of health care in the United States. But this debate is about more than cost. It is about human beings. It is about opportunity for those women who need that preventive care for their futures and their families' futures, and eventually for their children's futures. Every woman across our nation, including 1.4 million Medicaid patients that consider Planned Parenthood their primary source for preventive health, deserves to visit a health care provider that she trusts, a health care provider that many of us have in this body, whether we are men or women. And I'm talking about women like Rebecca in Meriden, Connecticut. Rebecca's parents' health coverage didn't extend to her, and she made too much money to qualify for Connecticut's Husky program, too much money meaning $10 an hour, and working part-time, a total of $10,000 a year, too much money to qualify for Husky, but she depended on Planned Parenthood for regular health screenings and contraceptive care. And as she said in her own words, Planned Parenthood was my saving grace for my reproductive health. Women like Maya, a 23-year-old, uninsured, a waitress, part-time, doing an unpaid internship for a nonprofit organization. She went to Planned Parenthood for her routine pap smear, and the results showed abnormal cells that required a biopsy and an operation to have the precancerous cells removed. That procedure could have been life-saving. So could other procedures, other testing and screening for countless women across the country and in Connecticut And all of these procedures take place day in and day out around Connecticut in Bridgeport for a price that they can afford. These stories from Rebecca and Maya are heard around our nation, and at least 60,000 strong in Connecticut alone. One of the presidents of our health care centers, Mark Maselli, the president of Community Health Care in Middletown, recently said, and I'm quoting, "Defunding Planned Parenthood would be the moral equivalent of turning off the electricity, and a whole segment of health care would go dark." That is what House Resolution 36 means in human terms. In dollars and cents, preventive health care, the kind of work done by St. Vincent's in Bridgeport and Hartford Hospital and Yale New Haven and countless others in the state of Connecticut and around this country, because our hospitals and our health care providers are responding responsibly to the need for lower cost and higher quality. But we must preserve the momentum to move forward and to make sure that the promise, as well as the obligation, the opportunity, as well as the mandate, is fulfilled. So I call for my Senate colleague to stand together for women like Rebecca and Meyer and for clinics and hospitals and providers across the nation that depend on Planned Parenthood, and to reject this resolution, to reject the effort to turn back the clock, and to settle this debate once and for all, to end the ideological war which has itself nothing to do with saving money, in fact, will cost more than it saves, and enable us to turn our attention, as we should and we must, to people who want us to put America back to work, to create jobs, to foster economic growth, to fulfill the mandate that was articulated and expressed so eloquently by the people of this country in this last election, which was not wage war on women's health. It was put Connecticut and put America back to work, create jobs, and continue our fragile economic recovery. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka. Senator from South Dakota.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, today we're going to vote on last year's unfinished business. We're going to vote on a continuing resolution that will fund the government through the end of this fiscal year, which ends on September the 30th. The proposal that we have before us in order to fund the government through the end of the fiscal year certainly isn't perfect. In fact, there are many, myself included, who would like to see it make deeper reductions in spending. That said, we will be voting on a proposal that will cut spending by around $40 billion this year, and when you look at baseline spending over the next decade, it actually saves over $300 billion over the 10-year period. And what strikes me about that, Mr. President, is it will be the first time in a long time that we have done something about reducing spending. That's something that's not routinely or traditionally done here. In fact, we're going to reverse a trend that began a long time ago, but really accelerated a couple of years ago when non-national security discretionary spending increased by almost 25% in the last 2 years. And so this is an important first step. Granted, it is a first step, Mr. President, and in a minute I'm going to get to the bigger issue. But it's critical that we send a message and a signal to the American people that we have heard their voices loudly and clearly, and that we get what they want us to do, and that is to get spending under control, to shrink the size of the federal government, to get it to live within its means, and to quit spending money that we don't have here in Washington. That's something that has been happening here for a long time, and it's taken on a whole new dimension here in the last couple of years. But as we talk about the unfinished business of last year and trying to get a measure in place that will fund the government through the end of the year that actually will reduce spending by about $40 billion, we are talking about the smaller part of overall spending when you look at the sort of macroeconomic view, or pull back, as some would say, for the 30,000-foot view and look at spending over the next decade. In fact, we had someone testify in front of the Senate Finance Committee yesterday, David Walker, former Comptroller General, who put it very well. He said that, talking and arguing about the funding in this continuing resolution is like arguing over the bar tab on the Titanic. We are on a sinking ship, and we need to be doing everything we can to reduce spending in the short term through this continuing resolution, getting maximum amount of spending reduction. But then we need to pivot and start talking about the next big battle, and that is the battle over the 2012 budget. Ironically, we are just now getting to the 112th Congress's business because we are wrapping up the business of the 111th Congress. The Democrat leadership here didn't pass a budget last year, didn't pass a single appropriation bill. As a consequence, we are here voting on now a continuing resolution doing last year's business to get us through the end of this fiscal year before we can start to work on the 2012 budget, which is where I think the big debate will begin about how we get this country back on a more reasonable fiscal path. Now, we've seen a couple of developments here in the last 2 weeks or so that bear on that debate. One is, last week we had the introduction by the House Republicans of a budget plan, a 10-year budget plan that was very aggressive in trying to take on the issue of spending and debt, very aggressive in trying to put pro-growth policies in place that would help grow the economy and create jobs, get our economy back on track in this country. And that was kind of the big discussion last week. Well, the President, I believe, felt left out of that discussion. And so he yesterday decided to make a speech in which he would lay out his vision for the next decade and how we address the big challenges that this country needs to tackle. And I would describe it, Mr. President, as a do-over, because the President's first trip to the plate was really his budget, which he submitted a couple of months ago, and which was conspicuously bereft of any effort to address the really big challenges facing the country. Didn't talk about, how we're going to reform entitlements, didn't address tax reform, actually increased spending, increased taxes, and increased dramatically over the next decade the debt, about double the gross debt from $13 to $14 trillion to over $26 trillion. That's using pretty, I think, optimistic economic assumptions. But that being said, the President, because he didn't address in his budget any of the big issues, and because the House Republicans put a proposal forward last week which would, I think felt like he needed to get in the game. And so yesterday he made a stridently partisan speech in which he tried to put forward a plan. I would argue that speech yesterday was very long on politics, very short on substance. There wasn't a lot in there to really sink your teeth into if you're someone who believes seriously that we need to make reforms in entitlement programs. There was the usual prescription for dealing with the deficit and the debt, which consisted of increasing taxes. There are tax increases in here, tax increases in the President's proposal on small businesses, the job creators in our economy. I would point out to my colleagues that half of all small business income is taxed at the individual level because many small businesses allow the income from that business to flow through to their individual tax return. And so you have a lot of small businesses around this country. In fact, the number of small businesses that would be impacted by his proposal employ about 35 million people in our economy. And so you're talking about raising taxes on the job creators, on the people who really are employing people across this country, and that was a key element in the President's prescription for dealing with the fiscal crisis that faces this country. Another one was relying on this proposal that was part of the health care reform bill to squeeze provider payments under Medicare to try and wring a little bit more out of Medicare. And he relies on an independent payment advisory board which would be empowered to go ahead and make reductions, to make cuts in provider payments. Now, what's interesting about that, Mr. President, is the health care reform bill last year did make significant cuts to providers, not to reform Medicare, but to create the new health care entitlement program, which, when it's fully implemented, will cost $2.5 trillion. So that is what the President used any savings that were achieved in Medicare last year to do. And so when he talks about now using this independent payment advisory board to make further reductions in provider payments, it is relying on the same old tried and true formula. I say tried and true, it's tried and failed formula that's been in place before. There's no reform in this proposal. There isn't anything new. There isn't anything innovative that says, let's figure out a way to solve this nation's fiscal problems that actually gets at the heart of the problem and doesn't use the same old failed prescriptions that have been used in the past. I frankly don't know what's going to happen if you continue to cut payments to physicians and to hospitals. You will find fewer and fewer medical providers are going to serve Medicare and Medicaid patients in this country. It's as simple as that. When you lose a little bit on each transaction, on each customer or each patient that you serve, you have to cost shift and make up for it by shifting more of the cost over to private payers, which continues to drive health care costs for everybody who is not on some government or receiving their health care from some government program, drive their health care costs even higher and higher. And so there really wasn't anything in there, Mr. President, that I would suggest really gets at this problem. Now, the other thing that was conspicuously silent from that speech was anything to do with reforming Social Security. We all know that Social Security is also a program which has ran a deficit last year. It looks like it will be in the black this year, but next year starts running deficits and then runs them well into the future. And we have to make that program solvent, not just for the senior citizens who are benefiting from it today, those who are nearing retirement age, but for the next generation. And the President decided to punt on that subject as well. And so, as I said, the speech yesterday was long on politics, short on substance, short on a meaningful discussion about how we get at and address and fix these enormous fiscal challenges that we face. The other thing that he does is he uses a 12-year time frame. Now, we normally operate here on a 10-year budget window. That's what the House does. That's what the Senate does. That's typically what the White House does when it submits a budget to Congress. So he stretched that out to 12 years. Perhaps maybe to lessen the impact of some of the few reductions that he does make in his budget, but nevertheless, it is a very different schedule in terms of the proposal that he makes relative to the one that came forth last week from the House Republicans. Now, the reason this whole debate is important is because we continue to spend and spend and spend like there's no tomorrow, and it's money we just flat don't have. This year, we will take in $2.2 trillion, spend $3.7 or $3.8 trillion. We're going to run a $1.6 trillion deficit. I've said this before on the floor, but, you know, it's 1:20 in the afternoon today. By tomorrow, Friday, at 1:20 in the afternoon, we will have added over $4 billion to the federal debt. That is the rate at which the spending and debt problem is going today. We cannot continue the path we are on. And some people would argue, the President and some of our colleagues on the Democrat side, that the way that you fix this is, quote, have a balanced approach that raises taxes, that there's got to be a tax increase as a part of this. I don't think the American people ought to have their taxes raised until we demonstrate a willingness to get at the heart of the problem. The problem here in Washington is not a revenue problem. It is a spending problem. And the numbers bear that out. If you look at the last 40 years of American history, the average amount that we spend on the federal government as a percentage of our total economy is 20.6%. So a little over a fifth of our entire economic output is spending by the federal government. This year, we will spend over 25% of our total economy on the federal government. And so we have seen the federal government in relation to our total economy grow by about 20% over the historical average just in the last couple of years. In the last 2 years under this administration, we have added almost $3.5 trillion to the federal debt. As I said before, spending increased, non-national security discretionary spending increased in the last 2 years by almost 25% at a time when inflation in the overall economy was only growing at 2%. So you had the federal government spending at somewhere on the order of 10 times or more than 10 times the rate of inflation. You cannot defend or justify that to the American people. The American people have a right to know that we're serious about getting spending under control, as evidenced by the Government Accountability Office report a few weeks back, where they came out and looked at, I think, about 1/3 of the overall government to determine where there was duplication, where there was wasteful spending. And if you can believe this, they came up with a number of conclusions, one of which was there are 82 programs at the federal government that deal with teacher training spread across 20 agencies or so of the federal government. Well, we have, if you can believe this, 56 programs that teach financial literacy. Now imagine Washington, D.C. lecturing or instructing anybody about this, around this country about financial literacy of all things. But 56 programs spread across 10 different agencies or departments of government that deal with financial literacy? I mean, the American people have got to be going, you know, get serious. This is the kind of thing that outrages and frustrates the American people. And that's why I think they want us to singularly focus on reducing spending and getting this debt under control, not by raising their taxes in the middle of an economic downturn, particularly the taxes on our small businesses who will create the jobs to get the economy back on track, but by reducing spending, Mr. President. That's where this debate ought to be centered. And regrettably, as I said, the President in his speech yesterday immediately latched on to the idea that we need to raise taxes on our small businesses, on our job creators. Well, we're going to have the chance, after the vote today on the continuing resolution, assuming that it passes, and then wrapping up last year's unfinished business, to shift to this debate about the debt limit. The debt limit will be the next major thing coming along that will present an opportunity for both Republicans and Democrats to engage in a dialogue and a debate about how to solve this country's fiscal problems, starting with measures that we put in place that put caps on spending. We have got to get spending under control. And then we will have a debate about the 2012 budget. Now, it's unclear to me at this point whether or not the Senate will do a budget. The House of Representatives clearly will. They passed it out of the Budget Committee. They're going to vote on it, I think, today. And they are going to put forward a plan that does reduce spending by over $6 trillion over the next 10 years, that brings reforms to our tax code that lower marginal income tax rates on our businesses and our individuals, that hopefully will create economic growth and development out there and create jobs, a budget that changes the way that we look at some of these traditional entitlement programs, insulating and protecting everybody who is over the age of 55. That's the ironic thing about it, because our colleagues on the other side get up and immediately attack this proposal as though it's going to cut benefits to senior citizens. The House plan that was put forward does not impact anybody over the age of 55. So if you're retired today and drawing Medicare benefits, or you're nearing retirement age, you are, under this particular proposal, unaffected. It would affect those younger than 55 who are beginning to look at the retirement years, wondering whether or not any of these programs are even going to be around for them. Well, we can make those programs sustainable and viable for people, younger Americans, Mr. President, if we're willing to look at these things in a new way. And the House budget does that. It makes reforms that puts the patient back in charge, the consumer back in charge, draws on the great, I think, impulses in our tradition in this country: competition, choice, allowing people to have more opportunity, more flexibility to choose a plan that works for them. And it seems to me, at least, that we have got to get to a new model because the current model clearly doesn't work. It is an example of just a government spending that, if it perpetuates, has a $38 trillion unfunded liability in Medicare alone, further unfunded liabilities in Social Security. We have a major problem in this country, Mr. President. It needs to be addressed. It starts with the next debate on the debt limit and then hopefully on the 2012 budget. But I'm glad to see the President finally having a proposal out there and engaging in this debate. Unfortunately, his vision is the wrong vision for the future of this country, but it is high time that the American people saw us take these issues on, have this debate, and let's hope that we can come together behind a proposal that will reduce spending, reduce debt, put us more on a fiscal footing that is good for future generations, and get this economy growing and creating jobs again. Mr. President, I yield the floor. That's the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that further calling of the roll be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we're going to be voting sometime today, and I'm concerned about the Tea Party Republican assault on the health of American women, because that's what we're going to be deciding. And the focus on this has little to do with deficit reduction, because better health automatically saves money. This assault is an attempt to change individual behavior to a standard that the Tea Party people see as proper for others exercising their own free will. It contains an element of unfathomable history, hypocrisy for those voting to kill Planned Parenthood. As members of Congress, we all have immediate access to first-class health plans. Never have to think about health coverage or our spouses or our children. It's all in the package. There is no decision to make between paying a medical bill and paying the rent. No decision to make between buying medicine and buying groceries. No decision to make between going into a hospital or going into bankruptcy. And yet, the Republicans here are fighting to take health care away from women, children, and families across America. They want to completely defund Planned Parenthood, an organization that's been serving women and families in America for more than 90 years. Today, Planned Parenthood operates more than 800 centers that serve 3 million women each and every year. For many low-income and young women, Planned Parenthood is a critical source of health care. And to women who can't afford medical coverage, Planned Parenthood says, don't worry, your health is more important. They don't just offer counseling on family planning, they also offer life-saving breast exams and cervical cancer screenings. We look at 820 centers nationwide serve 3 million patients each year, provide 800,000 breast cancer screenings, provide 1 million cervical cancer screenings. So important. Cancer screening saves lives, and since 1950s, cervical cancer screenings have cut mortality rates by more than 70%. And remember, treating cancer and other diseases early enough saves health care dollars in the long run. But this isn't just about sound fiscal policy or better accounting. No, no. They want to tell women, millions of them, if you can't afford it, tough luck. Tough luck. This is about the Tea Party Republicans remaking America in their own image. Their real goal is to impose their radical ideology on American women. They want to come into our homes, tell the women in our families how to live their lives, and this issue is deeply personal to me. My wife and I have 5 daughters and 8 granddaughters, and nothing is more important to me than their health, their well-being, and their freedom to make choices that suit their needs. If we kill funding for Planned Parenthood, millions of women will lose access to essential care. And those Tea Party Republicans claim that this will help close our deficit of dollars, but it will leave us with a deficit of decency. And it's not just women's health that the Tea Party Republicans are after. It's also health care for middle-class families across America. They want to stop the landmark health reform law dead in its tracks. This is the law that adds 32 million Americans on the rolls of the insured. So here's what I say to colleagues on the other side. If you don't want ordinary people to have affordable coverage, then show some sincerity and throw in the coverage that you have. Be honest, vote no, and tell your constituents why you're doing this. And say, I mean it when I say no, and I'm giving up my coverage to prove it. I'm talking to senators on the side of taking away the funding and talking to members of the House of Representatives to say no and mean no. The health reform law makes health care more affordable, more accessible, and more sustainable, and holds insurers more accountable. It makes medicine more affordable for seniors by closing the donut hole in the Medicare prescription drug benefit program. The new law also allows young adults to stay on their parents' health plans until age 26. And it gives small businesses tax credits to help them provide their employees with medical coverage. Now, without this law, insurers could once again restrict benefits, rescind coverage when people get sick, and refuse care to children with pre-existing conditions. I don't think we really want to return to the days when insurers could turn away from sick children. Life for me was up front and personal when it came to my family's health care needs. I grew up in a working-class family in Paterson, New Jersey. My father worked in the local silk mills, and he died of cancer at age 43, leaving my mother a widow at age 37. Our family struggled in bankruptcy as my father's life ebbed away. My mother owed doctors, hospitals, pharmacies money we just didn't have. And after my service in Europe in the Army, I was, because there was a government program, able to get my education, GI Bill. I joined two friends and built a company so successful that it's hard to imagine. It employs 45,000 people today, operating in more than 20 countries. 3 of us, 4 families. For me, the GI Bill made the difference. It's government stepping in when it was needed and put 45,000 people across this world to work. And that's what government's about. It's there to be helpful. This isn't just an accounting office. It's not just a fiscal policy problem. Because of my success in business, I never had to worry again about whether or not I could provide health care for my family. But I never forgot what it was like to be without health care. And we need the health reform law because no American should ever have to make sacrifices to afford health care. Americans are beginning to experience the benefits of this law. Why now would we want to put our progress on hold? I agree. We have serious economic problems in our country. But we're not going to solve them by taking health care away from American women and families. Don't take away this critical assistance for people who can't afford care they need. If we have fiscal problems, if we have deficit problems, there are ways to solve it. But one way is not to take health care away from people who need it. It's an injustice. We shouldn't permit it. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Senator from